Transmite en su canal de frecuencia modulada estereofónica multiplex La Voz Radio, desde New Haven, Connecticut, al mundo.
Buenas tardes, bienvenidos a todos. Mi nombre es Caprice, aquí con Juntos Podemos. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Caprice, here once again with Together We Can, where we celebrate co-creators of a kinder and more just world. Aquí celebramos los quienes hacen este mundo más gentil y más justo para todos. Y tenemos con nosotros dos personas que trabajan para nuestra comunidad a nivel estatal. Bienvenida, Amy Casavina Hall. Welcome, Amy. We've been in similar circles for several years, and you are definitely one of the co-creators of a kinder and more just world. Thank you for being with us today, Amy. Amy is with us directly from Connecticut United Way of Connecticut, with her colleague, Karen Buckman. Bienvenida, Karen. Es un placer tenerte aquí. Parece que sos una amiga de varios años atrás con La Voz Hispana. Bienvenida de vuelta, entonces. Welcome once again to La Voz Hispana, because, Karen, this is not your first time here with us. So welcome back, old friend.
Muchas gracias por la oportunidad.
And without further ado, because we have so much to talk about, and a lot of it, I think this show is really important because decisions are going to be made, whether it's in nonprofits, whether it's in the financial sector, whether it's at the legislative level at the State House. And also, families are making very difficult decisions at this time as well. And for the families in particular, I think it's very moving and powerful to know you're not alone in the struggle that many folks are feeling. This show airs live, Facebook Live throughout Connecticut. Anyone can watch it, even across the U.S., and also broadcasted simultaneously here, 103.5 FM in New Haven. And our listeners are majority New Haven based. And it's good to know you're not alone in these difficult economic times. So we're going to hear more about this report that is produced annually called Alice. Can you share with us a little bit about what are the economic background that you look to understand what is happening with families in a particular economic background here in Connecticut? Can you share with us a little bit about that before we go into the report? Que cada vez anualmente United Way de Connecticut implementan una investigación basado en datos que brinda una perspectiva sobre lo que está pasando con ciertos hogares dentro de Connecticut, y quisiera conocer un poco mejor a qué nivel económico estudian esos datos, se enfocan en qué nivel económico las familias aquí en Connecticut. Y este reporte se llama Alice, A-L-I-C-E. En español sería Alicia. Y primero voy a preguntarle a Amy si nos puede decir un poco sobre cuáles son las familias que ellos siguen en su proceso financiero durante el año. Amy, would you share with us a little bit about what are the income levels and families that you follow?
Thank you so much. It's such a delight to be here. And thank you for making the world a kinder and more just place. That warms my heart. So part of that is understanding what need looks like in Connecticut. What is financial hardship? And typically when decision makers think about financial hardship. They think about the federal poverty level. And in Connecticut, that doesn't mean much, right? It is a very low bar for people to understand financial hardship. So we wanted to give people another way to think about who is struggling and why in Connecticut. And that's why Alice was developed, to think about people often who are working, sometimes multiple jobs, but still not earning enough to cover the cost of basic needs. And so we look at both what are the costs of basic needs and how much income would you need to cover that cost. And that's Alice. Everyone living below the amount of money needed to meet a basic needs budget, the bare bones needed to live and work in a modern world.
Thank you so much. And Karen, si nos puedes explicar también un poco sobre cuáles son las familias para esta investigación, el nivel de ingreso. Y yo creo que este programa de hoy es sumamente importante para muchas de las familias, especialmente los de Connecticut, los quienes viven aquí en Connecticut, a saber de que no están solos en estos momentos tan difíciles, especialmente cuando uno se pone a pensar sobre las finanzas.
Sí, claro. Y primero quiero decir que este reporte se publica cada 2 años. Entonces, la última vez que tuvimos un reporte fue en 2020 y ese reporte hablaba de los datos de 2018, pero no hemos podido tener un reporte nuevo por causa del pandémico, ¿verdad? Entonces, este reporte de 2023 habla de los datos de 2021, primariamente. Las familias son trabajan muy fuerte y muchas veces más de un trabajo, 2, 3 trabajos para poder ganar lo suficiente para pagar las necesidades para la familia. Y estas familias no se consideran bajo el nivel de pobreza, pero ganan demasiado para recibir los beneficios que se dan a las familias muy pobres, pero no ganan suficiente para poder vivir y tener extra o aún para pagar los costos esenciales de la vida diaria.
Entonces, es decir, el gobierno federal dice el ingreso tiene que estar a un cierto nivel para ser considerado el nivel de pobreza, pero tomando en contexto, aquí en Connecticut, el costo de la vida cuesta más de lo que el gobierno federal está tomando en cuenta. Es decir, uno puede ganar lo mismo de, vamos a suponer, Florida, pero acá cuesta más ciertas cosas y el mismo nivel de ingreso que en Florida uno podría comprar, pagar servicios necesarios, comprar comida, todo eso vale más, alcanza más el bolsillo. Mientras aquí en Connecticut uno no gana, no alcanza lo suficiente.
Son diferentes en cada estado. Cada estado lo que necesita para vivir es diferente en cada estado de los Estados Unidos.
And so thank you for that distinction, Karen, where Alice, it really says, you know, the federal government has this certain income level that would then be considered poverty level, but yet when you look at the cost of living in certain states and how that changes, it varies how much goods and services can cost and how far your wages can go. You actually are not able to purchase the same amount of good and services as you do, like, for example, in Florida. So if you had the same wages and you lived in Florida, you might be able to survive a little better with those same wages. But in Connecticut, the cost of living is more expensive. And so the federal poverty line, the limitations of what they consider to be poverty are not necessarily adequate to talk around what Connecticut families need for survival, to be able to purchase the basic goods and services. And I really want to preface what we're talking about today, highlighting again, you mentioned hard workers, because there's SNAP right now, discussions on the SNAP. Federal government changed and increased how much you could actually make in order to be able to qualify for food assistance, a basic need that needs to be addressed. And I think it was like $243 or something like that. You're able to increase depending on family size, etc. And I saw some comments on social media, and folks were like, oh, there goes again my tax dollars for people who don't want to work. And I've heard that too many times in Connecticut. The first people to complain about people needing to request for support by the government from the taxes that we all pay, the first thing I hear from people are, oh, the people getting food support, they're lazy, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We're saying, I believe there are people who get that support, who need it, and some people can't work. They're physically unable to. And then we have people who are working 2 or 3 jobs, and it's not enough. And so I hope people really listen to the show today, take this information. United Way is a trusted nonprofit that has been around for a very long time. And what they're sharing, this is what is happening in Connecticut right now, where our taxes should be serving the common good, in my perspective, helping those that need help the most when they need it the most. And a little hand often goes a long way. A little help in the right moment often goes a long way. And we're talking about food insecurity. This is part of what we're going to talk about today. Really pay attention and share this and inform ourselves as to removing the political rhetoric. It's just human beings is what we're talking about. And so thank you. Without further ado, Amy, can you share with us what is the status of Connecticut residents who've called Connecticut home? And here you said folks have 2 or 3 jobs. Everybody in Connecticut who's an adult pays taxes. If you're fueling your gas tank, if you're getting wages removed from your earnings, paying taxes, everyone pays taxes in some form or another. What is the status of our people, our collective Connecticut people?
What a great question. So in Connecticut, 39% of households are ALICE, meaning they're living at or below what's needed to support that survival budget. And we call it survival budget for a reason. It is only the bare necessities. It is rent, food, healthcare, taxes, childcare, transportation. And it's a very, very conservative estimate of what those expenses are using real data, looking at the different counties in Connecticut. So it's adjusted within Connecticut by location, and it's adjusted by your family composition, right? So if you've got 2 kids, well, you need more income, and they're in childcare, than a single adult. So when you think about 39% of Connecticut households aren't getting by financially, that's an enormous number. It increased 1 percentage point from last time we did the report, but that 1 percentage point is over 54,000 families falling below the ALICE threshold. It's a lot.
That breaks my heart.
Mm-hmm.
That breaks my heart. And I wonder what our elected officials will do to remedy that. Because policy drives our economic forces.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you for this very important set of information. And we're going to hear more in the time that we have together. I'll give Karen an opportunity to share in Spanish. Karen, si nos puedes compartir un poco sobre qué es lo que encontraron en esta investigación, porque mucha gente cree que las personas que reciben asistencia de comida de parte del gobierno tal vez no trabajan lo suficiente, que no quieren trabajar o están abusando del sistema. Pero con lo que acaba de contar Amy, es de que hay muchas personas trabajando 2 o 3 trabajos y no tienen suficiente para sobrevivir. ¿Y cuánta gente en Connecticut están en esta situación?
Sí, gracias. Buena pregunta. Como Amy acaba de decir, 39% de los hogares en Connecticut no ganan suficiente para sobrevivir, para pagar los básicos como alquilar un apartamento, transportación, cuidar los niños, comida, la electricidad. Entonces, este 39% de personas representa más de 54,000 hogares en Connecticut que no pueden alcanzar. Y sí, están trabajando mucho y a veces 2 o 3 trabajos, pero no pueden alcanzar.
Y eso me hace preguntarme a mí misma, ¿qué está haciendo nuestro gobierno aquí a nivel estatal? ¿Cuáles van a ser las pólizas para apoyar, a echar la mano a las familias que necesitan, a los individuos que necesitan, para darles oportunidades a mejorar su situación, para no tener que sufrir con falta de recursos básicos para poder vivir aquí en Connecticut? Están trabajando. Estamos hablando de familias, individuos trabajando 2 o 3 trabajos y a que 39%, es decir, casi es más de 1 en cada 3 hogares están sufriendo. No tener suficiente para comida. And so this really, makes me ask myself, what is our Connecticut government's priority where more than 1 out of 3 households, you go into a neighborhood, you count 1 block, this household doesn't have enough to pay their bills this month. How are they going to make it through? And then count another house, and then this other house is suffering as well. So it's affecting a good number of entire communities, because we also know the disparity in income in Connecticut. It isn't where you have mixed income neighborhoods. It's often same level of income, and then another neighborhood right next door, a street across the street, you may have the entire neighborhood suffering. And so share more. What does it look like for families that are struggling? Nos pueden compartir un poco más en detalle qué es la vida cotidiana para las familias que no tienen suficiente, aunque están trabajando 2 o 3 trabajos aquí en Connecticut.
So what you said about it's not the same in Connecticut, right, is so very true. So we see those differences by where people live. So in Bridgeport, it's about 67% of households are Alice, right? Hartford's right behind there, followed by New Haven. The lowest percentage in the whole state, I think, is 12%. I believe that's Oxford, Connecticut. So we see these big differences by geography, but then we also see differences by race, ethnicity, and gender, which we have to talk about. So Black households in Connecticut, 52% of Black households are Alice. 54% of Hispanic households are Alice. Those are such high numbers. And I believe it's 78% of female-headed households with kids are Alice, which is an astounding figure. So while we talk about this statewide number of 39%, it's not affecting people equally across Connecticut. People of color and women in particularly are the ones facing the largest financial burden. And that's a story we can't tell enough and that people need to understand. People who live it understand, but you talked about decision-making and policy, and that's why we do this report. So people who don't live it, where it's not their neighbors, people in a position to make choices in Connecticut, they might not know. So we want to make sure people understand what financial hardship looks like very specifically in their towns they represent, in the counties where they live, and across this state. So we can put this in front of decision makers and help them make what we consider better decisions to support people, right? That's the purpose of this, to help people who can make decisions really understand if you want to fight poverty, if you want to help people who are working hard, so hard, but still can't get it all to add up during the month or at the end of the month, you have to make different decisions. So here's data to help you understand what that looks like in your community and across the state. And you can see what expenses are such hardships like childcare and rent in particular, which are incredibly high in Connecticut. What can we do about that to help people? We want people to be successful in Connecticut, and we want kids and families to be successful. We have to make decisions that support their success. So let's give people current, real, local data to help everyone, but especially policymakers, make decisions that help turn us in a different direction.
Thank you, Amy. And Karen did add that this report is looking squarely in the last years of COVID pandemic, 2019 to 2021. And many people talk about the impact of COVID-19. We're looking at it right now. And it felt to me the state legislative process and the budget process, the last legislative session, did not respond to the crises that people were feeling from the pandemic. The economic difficulties were not addressed adequately, where the elected officials too often, I feel, from how they reacted or lack of reaction and lack of proactiveness, in my perspective, were far removed from the realities of families. And thank you for producing this Alice report to try to bridge that gap in hopes that now with this data, they will wake up and move like their own family is in a crisis, where almost 1 out of 3, 1 out of 4 are suffering, meeting the basic needs. So thank you so much. Karen, ¿nos puedes explicar un poco en español sobre cuáles ciudades aquí distritos de Connecticut están sufriendo más porque uno en cada tres o casi uno en cada dos casas, hogares, están sufriendo. Pero sabemos de que hay una desigualdad en Connecticut, que no todos sufrimos al mismo nivel. ¿Y cuáles son las ciudades y qué porcentaje de la gente está sufriendo en este momento económicamente?
Sí, claro, Caprice. Lo que es importante saber es que Alicia, como decimos en español, vive en cada parte de Connecticut. No hay ninguna ciudad, no hay ningún pueblo que no tiene, que no tiene una Alicia, ¿verdad? Entonces, los porcentajes son más altos en las ciudades, como 68% en Bridgeport, por ejemplo, y después sale Hartford y después New Haven. Entonces, ahí tenemos las diferencias. Hay pueblos que tienen muy poco, 12%, como Oxford, Connecticut, pero lo importante otra vez es que aún es 12%, Alicia existe en cada parte de nuestro estado. Y las diferencias son más altas para la gente de color. 52% de las americanas, 54% de los hispanos y 78% para las mujeres y las madres que no están casadas. Y para darle un ejemplo, unas historias. Una madre hispana que vive en Manchester, que tiene una niña de 2 años, ella trabaja completo, ¿cómo se dice? Parte completo.
¿Tiempo completo?
Tiempo completo, gracias. Y ella, después de añadir todos los gastos que ella tiene, aunque está trabajando tiempo completo, ella tiene después $51 al final de cada mes. Y esto no incluye dinero para ahorros, no pueden apurar nada, no tienen dinero para una emergencia, no tienen, esto no incluye servicio de deuda. Entonces, eso es un ejemplo. Hay otro ejemplo de una madre soltera con 2 niños que vive en New Britain y ella está trabajando mucho y ella a veces durante la vida, estas personas, estos hogares, las familias, tienen que decidir, ¿voy a pagar la electricidad o voy a pagar mi renta? Entonces, esta última mujer, ella no tenía para pagar la electricidad y decidió pagar la renta. Entonces, vivía con la hermana, los hijos y ella vivieron con la hermana porque no tenían para pagar la electricidad, pero querían guardar la casa. Entonces, estas decisiones son las que estas familias, estos hogares tienen que hacer cada día, cada mes. Imagínense tener solo $51 al final del mes y no incluye nada para emergencia, ahorros o servicio de deuda. Increíble.
Thank you, Karen, for highlighting an example where you shared, for example, a mom with a 2-year-old in Manchester, Connecticut, and she's working, and at the end of the month, she only has $51 left, which that's not enough to put away for an emergency funds nor to have savings. And another family, a mom, single mom, having to decide at the end of the month, will I pay electricity this month or will I pay the rent? And wanting to have housing, instead choosing to keep being able to pay the rent and living with her sister and her children in order to share expenses so that the bills get covered, and people having to make these decisions every day here in Connecticut, difficult decisions. And I just can't imagine how it exacerbates the difficulty that our public schools face, where this explains why when I've worked with public schools, the keeping the contact information of parents up to date is so difficult because families are moving so often here in Connecticut in certain school districts to try to make ends meet. That is something, and having been a student, a college student and graduate student, and I've moved a lot in order to make sure that I saved as much as possible so I could put myself through school, and still paying off my student debt. So this also affects young families trying to do the right thing. We're told, go to school, get your education, and then the student loans are too much. And you're lucky if your parents have a house to go to. But if you're first generation, you're the hope of the family. And then you are also trying to take care of your family where you still haven't quite made it. So the layers of whom this affects, 39% of Connecticut. It's hurting a lot of families. And so, Amy, thank you for talking about sharing this with elected officials. Amy compartió con nosotros de que ellos comparten estos datos con los legisladores a nivel estatal, porque nosotros creemos de que los legisladores con información pueden hacer lo correcto y cambiar el rumbo de la situación financiera de muchas de las familias de Connecticut, que muchas personas están sufriendo y nuestros elegidos tienen que hacer algo. What are your plans in regards to sharing this with elected officials?
Sure. So I think one of the things that's so exciting about Connecticut is we've been doing this for a while. We were the second state in the country to do ALICE work. And so it's really exciting that so many of our elected officials, particularly like in leadership positions, they know ALICE. They talk about ALICE, right? You don't talk about who in their community is living below the federal poverty level. They talk about who in their community is ALICE, which is a huge win. But we need everyone to both understand, right? So we will be working every day, all day, between now and the legislative session to put the information in front of decision makers through media, through social media, through people's voices, through everything we can throw at them, right? To help people understand. And then we want them to act, right? Knowing isn't enough. ALICE needs help now.
Thank you for that.
ALICE needs help now. And that's really our top message. It's important to know, but action's what really matters. So what can we do for people? And so we'll be with our partners, with anyone who wants to join us, with as many voices as we can, be telling the story of ALICE, what it means to people, what it means to communities, and what steps we can take to make things better, to give people different options and pull down not only the financial hardship, but the stress that comes from every day having to make decisions about what versus what. It's too much on people, and it only adds to the problem. And we want both that financial relief and that emotional relief for people also. So you can think about your future. You can think about happy times with your children. You can think about what you want to do next and where you want. You can dream. But there's no dreaming when you're constantly trying to balance so many balls at once and still not having enough at the end of the month to make it happen.
Thank you, Amy. Karen, ¿nos puedes explicar cómo es que ustedes van a promover esto con los legisladores, esta información tan importante?
Claro, es que es importante saber que la misión de United Way de Connecticut es ayudar a los residentes de Connecticut no solamente sobrevivir, pero prosperar. Y esa es la misión de nosotros. Entonces, nosotros estamos compartiendo esta información en el reporte a todo el mundo, especialmente a los legisladores, para que ellos puedan hacer un cambio. Porque necesitamos, como Emil dijo, que Alicia necesita la ayuda ahora. Entonces estamos compartiendo por video, en la televisión, por la radio, en las redes sociales, en cualquier parte que podemos para que la gente, especialmente las que hacen las decisiones, escuchen.
Thank you. Thank you both so much for being here today. There is one thing that I wanted to ask, which is this report, does it make a distinction between households with mixed immigration status or undocumented immigrant families or U.S. citizens only, or does it make a distinction with immigration status?
No, it doesn't, which is one of the things with our research partners we really want to look at and better understood, because it's more of the story, right? And it's so important to look at this by locality, by race, by gender, and we'd also look to see it by disability status, by immigration status. How can we get deeper and learn more? Because the more we know, the better solutions we can offer. And that's really important to us.
Thank you. And I believe the 39% supersedes immigration status, undocumented household numbers here in Connecticut, so that it's more than just folks who don't have U.S. citizenship. We're talking about everyone who works here, regardless of immigration status. And so to me, it emphasizes how we're in similar boats. And I've read time and time again where a society that supports the individuals that struggle the most, everyone succeeds. Because those that struggle the most, the barriers that they face, there's at least another person that can resonate with the multiple barriers that they face. At least one of those barriers are similar. And then therefore the strategy supports all. And I think part of what I'm hearing is people want to work and earn and make a living, an honest living, but they have one job and it's not enough, so they get another in hopes that helps. And they work hard, want to earn, and yet they can't get ahead. So they might get another job. They might decide to live with families. All of these creative, useful strategies, but still, it's not enough. And so there's something wrong when it's not enough and it needs to be fixed. And so thank you for highlighting that. De que la gente está trabajando, encuentran un trabajo y trabajan fuerte, de ahí tal vez piensen de que con otro trabajo va a ser suficiente y resulta que no. Y también tienen estrategias para poder mejorar su situación financiera y todavía no es suficiente. Y eso quiere decir para mí de que hay algo quebrado, hay algo que no funciona bien en la sociedad cuando 39% de nuestra comunidad a nivel estatal está sufriendo. Y antes que nos corte el tiempo, si cada una quiere compartir un poco el mensaje que tendrían para la comunidad, los quienes están escuchando, ¿qué mensaje quieran terminar hoy el programa de hoy? I'd love to give both of you 5 minutes each before we end the program today. What message would you like to share with our listeners today? Y first I'll go with Karen. Karen, si quieres compartir en español.
Sí, claro. El mensaje para mí es que hay mucha gente que está sufriendo y están sobreviviendo. Entonces, para nosotros nos gustaría mucho si ustedes tienen una historia, si quieren contar la historia de usted, de cómo es, cómo está la vida en su hogar, cuáles son las dificultades que ustedes tienen, cuáles son las luchas que ustedes tienen, pagar las cuentas. Y si tienen interés de contar esta historia, por favor, contáctenos en United Way de Connecticut, porque nosotros, los legisladores, es tan difícil para mí decir, los legisladores necesitan oír de las personas que votan para ellos. Entonces, ellos quieren escuchar y oír de sus residentes y necesitamos las voces de ustedes para contar la realidad de cómo es vivir en este estado. Entonces, por favor, si pueden y tienen interés de contar esta historia, favor de dejarnos saber, por favor.
Gracias, Karen. And what message would you like to share with our listeners today, Amy, before we end the show?
I did not totally understand Karen's message, but I have no doubt she said, tell your story. Tell your story. I heard that. Tell your story again. You don't have to know about policy proposals. You don't have to know anything to tell you. You just have to know your story. You just have to say, this is what I'm facing, and this is what I'm doing, and I need help. And that makes such a difference. It's one thing to put out data, but it doesn't really work unless there's a story behind it, unless people connect with that person in that family who's working so hard. And the numbers just don't add up. And I want people to know, everyone to know, that we need to be as resourceful and as creative and as committed as these parents and families are who make all these decisions to figure out how to make things work. Every day are figuring out, what can I do? How can I relieve stress here? How can I do this? They are doing that work. And now everyone needs to do the work to change this situation, to make sure, families and kids have enough food, they can show up to school and be successful, that when people work hard, they've got the funds to pay their rent, to afford childcare. Because not only do we should want everyone to be successful, but that's how we all do well. Everyone does better when kids are fed and are comfortable and successful at school. Everyone does better when you're not worrying about how to make rent or where you're going to live next month, right? All that energy can go somewhere else. And we want to join with so many others to make that happen. And any way we can partner with people to do that, we'd love to hear and talk about.
Thank you so much, Amy. Thank you so much, Karen. And I'll translate really quickly what Amy shared in Spanish. And before I do that, I do want to share that the other thing that I see in social media often is this concern around the need to police, increase greater police, stop car theft. That's a thing that is happening across the country. Folks taking people's vehicles. And a lot of this, to me, is the desperation. We said 39%. 39%. And we say, go get a job. Well, people try that. Go get another job. Well, people are trying that too, and it's still not enough. So if you have to feed yourself or feed your children, feed your family. I actually met a young person in New Haven who got in trouble with the law. He was selling the wrong thing at a corner. And he said, my mom got sick. She worked in a restaurant, and she had two restaurants, actually. And she got sick, and I had a little sister, and I had to get food. Being the man of the house at 14, I had to get food for my family, is what he shared with me. The mom shared with me the same story, crying, and she didn't want him to do that, and she couldn't stop him. And the family had food, and he went to prison, to juvenile detention. And his whole life, I followed him for 10 years and then I lost touch with him. And the schools didn't want him. He didn't finish high school. He was told, go finish your GED at the age of 17. If he didn't show up to school, he would just get expelled. That's what he did. He actually got expelled, but didn't finish his GED. I saw him at a gas station. But all is to say, where are we putting our resources? Prevention. We save so many dollars, so many dreams, and so many lives. And so thank you for supporting the dreams of our children and the many families who felt they didn't have a voice. You're amplifying their stories and their voices. And so thank you so much, Amy and Karen. Lo que dijo Amy fue de que ahora es el momento, de acuerdo con lo que dijo Karen, levantar la voz, ser parte de promover sus historias para hacer el cambio en este momento. Ya es suficiente a que hay familias y niños sin comida en la noche, sin saber a dónde van a dormir. Ahora es el momento en actuar, porque ya no se puede esperar. Ya con esta información hay que tomar acción y cambiar las situaciones de muchos. Y hay mucha gente que habla de una manera despectiva de las personas que están robando carros, están haciendo cosas que están en situaciones donde tienen que buscar cómo sobrevivir. Y si un trabajo, 2 trabajos, 3 trabajos no son suficientes, ¿qué es lo que nuestro pueblo puede hacer? Podemos levantar la voz y tomar acción. Y si uno tiene la bendición de poder pagar y comprar lo que necesitan para sobrevivir, también es una manera de combatir el crimen, a que uno levante la voz con esas bendiciones y decir, los demás también merecen su oportunidad para poder sobrevivir. Gracias, Karen. Gracias, Amy, por estar aquí con nosotros. Y también, por favor, comuníquese con el grupo Recovery for All. Would be a perfect ally for you. In the sense of they know many people where I was part of some of the public testimonies this last year where many people, hundreds of people testified and told their stories, and yet our current elected officials did not budge where their budgets did not hear the call of it. This is a state of emergency, except for some of our long advocates who have been educated and informed on the situation and have taken action. So perhaps they wouldn't listen to the voices of some of Connecticut's people saying this is a state of emergency. And perhaps it's the data from a reputable entity that is nonpartisan. It does not dive into Democrats, Republicans, Libertarians. It's just the facts centered on humanity. And so perhaps this will open up the doors and hearts of some of our elected officials that refuse to budge. But especially, this is something that everyone in Connecticut, there's someone throughout Connecticut in the different geographic points that is suffering now, and elected officials can improve their lives. And so thank you. Gracias por escuchar. Aquí, juntos podemos, together we can. Thank you, Amy and Karen. Have a beautiful rest of your day.
Gracias.
Gracias.